Evan Carter grabbed the man's collar with both hands, slammed him against the wall of that five-stall room, and put his face 2 inches from a man worth $300 million. Say that again, Evan said. I dare you. The room went dead silent. 300 guests, crystal chandeliers, a string quartet that had stopped playing mid-note, and one carpenter from Ohio who had just made the most powerful boardroom in the country hold its breath. Nobody saw this coming, not from him. But to understand why a man like Evan Carter snapped in the middle of a billionaire's wedding, you need to go back to where the night began. Drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. You're going to want to stay for all 5 parts. The invitation had been sitting on Evan Carter's kitchen counter for 11 days. It wasn't that he forgot about it. He couldn't forget about it. The envelope was cream-colored and thick, the kind of stationery that cost more per sheet than he made in an hour. His name was written across the front in gold ink, in handwriting so perfect it had to be done by someone who did nothing else for a living. He had propped it against the coffee maker because that was the one spot in the kitchen he visited every single morning without fail. 5:15 a.m., before Noah woke up, before the world got loud, that was Evan's time. 2 minutes of standing in the quiet with a mug that said, "World's okayest dad," a gift from his son last Christmas, badly wrapped in 3 layers of tape. Every morning for 11 days, he looked at that envelope and thought, "I'm not going." And every morning, he poured his coffee, walked to the living room, and let another day talk him out of sending his regrets. Because the invitation wasn't from just anyone, it was from Marcus Webb. Marcus Webb had been Evan's best friend since the 3rd grade. They had grown up 3 houses apart on the same dead-end street in Dayton, Ohio, the kind of street where everyone knew your business and nobody locked their doors. They had ridden bikes together, gotten in trouble together, graduated high school together, and then taken 2 very different roads into adulthood. Marcus had gone to business school on a scholarship, worked his way through finance, built something, made it. Now he was the kind of man who wore watches that cost more than Evan's truck, and he did it without ever being the kind of person who made you feel bad about your truck. That was Marcus. Money had changed his circumstances. It hadn't changed him. When Marcus called 3 months ago to say he was getting married, and Evan had better be there, or he would fly to Dayton personally and drag him to the venue, Evan had laughed and said yes without thinking. He hadn't thought about the logistics until the invitation arrived. Black tie optional. The venue, the Grand Harrington Hotel, downtown Chicago. One of those places that had its own Wikipedia page and a waiting list for event bookings that stretched 2 years out. Evan owned 1 suit. He had bought it for his wife's funeral. He didn't talk about Claire much, not to people he didn't know well, not even sometimes to people he did. 5 years had passed since the accident, a December evening, black ice on Route 40, a truck that ran a red light, and the grief had settled into something he could carry now without it knocking him down. Most days. Noah had been 14 months old when it happened. He had no memory of his mother. He knew her from photographs, from the stories Evan told him at bedtime, from the way his father sometimes went quiet when a certain song came on the radio and stared at nothing for a few seconds, before blinking and coming back. Raising Noah alone had been the hardest and most clarifying thing Evan had ever done. It had stripped him of everything that wasn't essential. He didn't have time for self-pity. He didn't have bandwidth for bitterness. He got up every morning because a little boy needed him to, and somewhere along the way that necessity had become the most honest kind of purpose he had ever known. He was a carpenter, a craftsman really, though he rarely used that word because it sounded pretentious to him. He built custom furniture in a workshop attached to the back of his rental house. Tables, cabinets, bookshelves, the occasional bed frame. He was good at it, better than good. He had a waiting list of his own, 6 months out, and his shows up in house as worth 10 times what I'd ever own. He took pride in that, a quiet, private kind of pride. He made enough, not more than enough, but enough. Noah had what he needed. That was the math that mattered. The morning before the wedding, he pulled the suit out of the closet. It still fit. Barely. His shoulders had gotten broader from years of physical work, and the jacket pulled slightly across the back when he moved his arms. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a long moment, turning sideways, assessing. Noah appeared in the doorway behind him, still in his pajamas, holding a cereal bowl with both hands. "You look weird," his son said. "Thanks, buddy. Why are you wearing that?" "I'm going to Uncle Marcus's wedding." Noah's eyes went wide. He had been to exactly one wedding in his 6 years of life, a cousin's outdoor ceremony, the previous summer, that he mostly remembered because there was a bouncy castle. "Is there gonna be cake?" "Probably a lot of cake." "Can I come?" Evan crouched down so he was eye level with his son. Noah had Claire's eyes, that specific shade of gray-green that looked different depending on the light, and Evan's nose, which Noah complained about regularly because Evan had told him once, jokingly, that it was the Carter family nose, built for durability rather than elegance. "Not this time, bud. You're staying with Miss Patterson." Noah's face did the calculation. Miss Patterson was their neighbor, a retired schoolteacher in her 60s who smelled like cinnamon and let Noah stay up an hour past his bedtime and never mentioned it to Evan. This was acceptable. "Okay," Noah said. "Will you bring me cake?" "I'll bring you the whole top tier if I can get it out without anyone noticing." Noah went back to his cereal, satisfied. Evan stayed crouched there for a moment after he left, looking at the empty doorway, and felt the familiar weight of it, the particular loneliness of getting dressed for something, without anyone to tell you that you look fine, you look great, don't be nervous. He stood up, straightened his tie, got in the truck. The drive to Chicago was 3.5 hours. He spent the first hour arguing with himself about whether to turn around. He spent the second hour thinking about what he was going to say to Marcus when he got there, the easy conversation of old friends who didn't need to perform for each other. He spent the last 90 minutes thinking about nothing in particular, just watching the flat landscape slide past, the way the sky got bigger the farther you got from the city. He parked the truck in a garage 3 blocks from the hotel because he had looked up the valet pricing online and made a decision. Walking toward the Grand Harrington, he noticed the other guests arriving. The cars, the clothes, the way these people moved unhurried and certain, like the world had agreed in advance to wait for them. Evan walked through the front entrance of the hotel and stopped. The lobby was the size of a small town, marble floors, ceilings that disappeared into light, flower arrangements taller than he was, white and gold, the kind that weren't there to be pretty but to communicate something about scale and expense. A man in a white jacket appeared at his elbow. "Your name, sir?" "Evan Carter." The man consulted his list, found the name, and nodded with a smile that was warm and practiced in equal measure. "Of course. The ceremony is in the grand ballroom. If you'll follow me." Evan followed. He found Marcus before the ceremony started, in a side room with the groomsmen, and what appeared to be a considerable quantity of premium bourbon. Marcus Webb had grown into a tall, broad-shouldered man with a bald head he kept shaved close, and a laugh that still sounded exactly like it had when they were kids, sudden and full, like it surprised even him. When he saw Evan walk through the door, he crossed the room in 4 strides and grabbed him in a hug that lifted him 2 inches off the ground. "You actually came. You said you'd fly to Dayton and drag me." "I would have. I had a whole speech prepared." Marcus pulled back, holding Evan by the shoulders, looking at him. "You look good, man. I look like I'm wearing a suit I bought for a funeral." "Yeah, but you wear it with dignity." Marcus grinned. "How's Noah?" "He asked me to bring him cake. I'll personally cut him a piece the size of his head." Marcus turned back to his groomsmen, waving Evan in. "Gentlemen, this is Evan Carter, best man I know. Worst dresser in the Midwest." The other men laughed. Evan shook hands. He accepted a glass of bourbon. He had no intention of finishing, and stood there in the easy warmth of male camaraderie, and for the first time since he'd gotten in the truck that morning, the tightness in his chest loosened slightly. He could do this. The ceremony was beautiful in the way that very expensive things are always beautiful, perfectly executed, nothing left to chance. Marcus's bride, a woman named Diane, was radiant and clearly deeply in love, and when she cried during her vows, half the room cried with her. Evan didn't cry. He thought about Claire. He thought about a much smaller ceremony, a church barely big enough to hold their families, a dress she had found at a consignment shop, and altered herself, vows they had written in a notebook they passed back and forth for 2 weeks. He had cried then. He had not been embarrassed about it. After the ceremony, the guests moved into the main ballroom for cocktail hour, and this was where Evan's sense of ease began to quietly dissolve. The ballroom was another dimension, not a room, a statement. The kind of space that existed to remind you of your relative significance in the order of things. And it worked. Evan could feel it working on him as he moved through the crowd with a glass of something sparkling that had been pressed into his hand by a passing server. Around him, conversations moved in a frequency he didn't fully share. People talked about markets, about their foundations, about properties in places he had never been. He caught fragments. The Aspen House needs a new roof, we're looking at. Board meeting went 3 hours over, but the numbers came in. She's at Yale now. Can you believe it, our little? He was surrounded by success in every direction. It was not a hostile environment. Nobody was rude to him. Nobody pointed, but there was a gap invisible, unbridgeable, between his life and the lives in this room, and he felt it in his body the way you feel a change in air pressure. He found a spot near the edge of the room, a slight remove from the densest clusters of conversation, and stood there with his drink and watched. He was good at watching. Carpentry had made him observant, the way a piece of wood had its own logic, its own grain, and if you paid attention, you understood where it wanted to go and where it would resist you. People had that too if you looked. He was looking. And that was when he saw her. She was standing near the far wall, half turned away from the room, holding a champagne glass she hadn't touched. She was dressed in a gown the color of deep water, midnight blue, simple and precise, the kind of garment that announced its own quality without trying. Her hair was dark and worn up, a few strands loose at her temples, in a way that might have been deliberate, or might have been the result of a long night. She was, by any reasonable measure, the most striking person in a room full of striking people. But that wasn't what caught Evan's attention. What caught his attention was her face. Specifically, the expression on it, when she thought no one was watching. It was the expression of someone who was profoundly, completely exhausted by the room they were standing in. Not bored, that would have been too shallow. This was something deeper. A kind of tiredness that had moved past the physical into the bones. He recognized it. He had worn it himself in the early years after Claire. The face you put on for the world and the face underneath it, and the gap between them, and the effort it took to keep the second one hidden. She wasn't doing a great job of hiding it just then. But Evan suspected nobody in this room was looking closely enough to notice. He kept watching. A man in a silver tie approached her. She straightened immediately, the public expression snapping into place like a visor. She listened. She said something that made the man laugh. He moved on. The moment he was 3 steps away, her face fell again. Same sequence. Snap up, engage, release. She was performing, Evan realized, doing it expertly. But performing nonetheless, he thought, who is she? He had no idea. He didn't move in circles where people like this were known quantities. He could have taken out his phone and looked her up, he supposed, but that felt strange and vaguely invasive. If he was going to find out, he'd rather it happened the normal way. He watched a third man approach her, older, heavy-set, with the particular bearing of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room, and watched her straighten again, engage again. And this time, he saw something different in her eyes. Not exhaustion, alarm brief, controlled, but there. The heavy-set man, something close to her ear. She nodded once. He touched her elbow, proprietorial, not quite appropriate, and moved on. She watched him go. Then she turned and looked directly across the room. At nothing, at the middle distance, at the way out. And Evan thought, that's enough. He wasn't sure what he meant by it. He wasn't planning anything. He was a man who had driven 3.5 hours in an old pickup truck to stand at the edge of a party where he didn't belong, and he wasn't in the business of inserting himself into other people's situations. But he also knew what it looked like when someone needed to stop performing. He picked up 2 fresh glasses of something from a passing tray, he didn't look at what, and started walking toward her. He was halfway across the room when he understood, with a slow and slightly alarming clarity, that several people in his path were noting his trajectory and looking mildly confused by it. Like, that man is walking toward Victoria Sterling. Why is that man walking toward Victoria Sterling? Does he know who that is? He did not know who that was. He kept walking. When he got close enough, he held out one of the glasses. She turned. Up close, she was sharper than she had appeared from across the room. Cheekbones, eyes that were a complicated brown, the kind that looked gold in certain light. She took him in with a single, efficient look that assessed, cataloged, and delivered a verdict in approximately 1 second. He had the feeling he had not scored particularly well. "You look like you could use a drink," he said. "Fair warning, I don't actually know what this is. Someone handed it to me and I just took 2. It might be champagne. It might be sparkling water. It might be something that costs more than my truck." A pause. She looked at the glass. She looked at him. "Your truck, old green, has a crack in the passenger side window I've been meaning to fix for about 2 years. He lifted his own glass. "I'm Evan." Another pause, shorter this time. "Victoria." "Nice to meet you, Victoria." He glanced around the room, then back at her. "You looked like you were calculating exit strategies." Something shifted in her expression. Not much, a fraction. But he caught it. "I'm calculating something," she said carefully. "I was doing the same thing about 20 minutes ago. I'm not really a this kind of room person, and yet here you are. My best friend's getting married. Hard to say no to that." He nodded toward the dance floor, where Marcus was now attempting something that could generously be called dancing. "That's him, Marcus Webb, groom, outstanding person, questionable rhythm." She actually looked. When she turned back, there was something fractionally less guarded in her face. "How do you know him?" she asked. "Since the 3rd grade. He used to charge neighborhood kids 50 cents to hear him burp the alphabet. He's come a long way." He paused. "How about you? Bride's side or groom's side?" "Neither, really. Business associates." There was an invitation, and she stopped. "I was encouraged to attend." "Encouraged," Evan repeated. "That's a word that covers a lot of ground." She looked at him more carefully. "It does." There was a moment of silence that wasn't uncomfortable. Evan took a sip of his drink, champagne, genuinely excellent champagne, which told him something about the price point of this wedding and made him briefly anxious about the gift he had brought, a handmade walnut serving board that had taken him 8 hours, and that he was now wondering if he should have just given a check. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said. "Sure." You walked across a room full of people you clearly don't know, handed a glass of unidentified liquid to a complete stranger, and started a conversation. Most people in this room spend 20 minutes engineering an approach. She tilted her head slightly. "Why?" Evan considered that. "You looked like you were about 2 minutes from going to hide in the coat closet," he said. "I've been there. Figured the coat closet could wait another 5 minutes while you talk to someone who isn't trying to get anything from you." She went very still, not frozen still. The way a person goes still when something has landed precisely in a place they weren't expecting to be touched. "And what makes you so sure," she said slowly, "that you're not trying to get something from me?" "I genuinely don't know who you are," Evan said. "I know your first name is Victoria. You're wearing a dress that I probably couldn't afford, and you've been standing in this room for however long, looking like you're solving a math problem that doesn't have an answer." He shrugged. "Beyond that, I'm in the dark." Victoria Sterling looked at Evan Carter for a long moment. And then, quietly, she laughed. It was small, just a breath, really, a surprised exhalation through her nose, but it was real. He could tell the difference. He had watched her perform 5 versions of a social laugh in the past half hour, and this wasn't any of them. "You really don't know who I am," she said. It wasn't a question. "Should I? Most people in this room would be able to tell you my net worth, the current price of my company's stock, and the name of the man I was photographed with at last month's fundraiser." Evan processed this. "So you're a what?" "Big deal. That's one way to put it." Right, he looked at her steadily. Does that make the champagne taste better? She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at her glass, then back at him. No, she said. It really doesn't. Then we're both just standing here with decent drinks at somebody else's party, Evan said. Seems fair. They found their way to a quieter corner of the room, not together exactly, more like two people who happened to drift in the same direction, at the same pace. There was a ledge along the wall, wide enough to sit on, which they both discovered at the same moment and both chose without discussing it. Side by side, looking out at the party they were not entirely part of. So Victoria said after a moment, "What do you do, Evan?" "I'm a carpenter, furniture, tables, cabinets. I build things. Custom work? I have a workshop at home. 6-month waiting list right now, which sounds impressive until you realize I work alone, and I'm not exactly charging hedge fund prices. But you're good." It wasn't a question which surprised him. "I am," he said. No false modesty. He had learned that about his work it was one of the few places where he had earned the right to state the truth plainly. "How do you know when something you've built is finished?" she asked. He thought about it. "When it stops having anything to prove." She turned to look at him. He felt it but didn't turn back yet. "That's not a carpenter's answer," she said. "Maybe not." He looked at her then. "What do you do, besides being apparently famous?" A dry sound, not quite a laugh. "I run a technology company. My father started it. I've been running it for 6 years. Do you like it?" Silence. "That's a strange question." "Is it? Nobody asks me that." She said it simply, with no inflection, which made it somehow worse. Just a fact, a condition of her existence. "Nobody asks me that." "I'm asking," Evan said. She looked out at the room. A chandelier above the dance floor was turning slowly, throwing diamonds of light across the walls, across the faces of the well-dressed crowd. "Some parts of it," she said finally. "The parts where I'm actually solving something. Building something the way you build things. The rest of it," she paused. "The rest of it is mostly being a surface that things happen on. A surface, a face, a figurehead. A story that other people tell about what I represent." She turned the champagne glass in her hands. "My father was the company. I've spent 6 years trying to become the company." "I'm not sure those are the same thing." Evan was quiet for a moment. "What did he think? Your father? He died 4 years ago." "I'm sorry. So am I." She said it without the automatic deflection that most people deployed when death came up in conversation. "No, it's fine, or it was a while ago. Just so am I." He respected that. "I lost my wife 5 years ago," he said. She looked at him, not with the social sympathy face, the tilted head, the soft "oh, I'm so sorry," but with attention. Real attention. "How?" she asked. "Car accident, December." "Black ice." He was quiet for a beat. "She had just found out she was pregnant with our second. We didn't know yet whether it was a boy or girl." He had not said that in years. He was not sure why he was saying it now. There was something about the way she was listening, like she was actually there, not planning her response, just there. "I have a son," he continued, "Noah. He's 6. Evan stopped. Smiled, and it was a different kind of smile than anything he'd produced at this party. Private, specific. "He's the funniest person I've ever met. He doesn't know that about himself yet, which makes it better." Victoria was watching him. "He sounds remarkable," she said. "He's remarkable," Evan agreed. "He's also 6, which means he has 0 filter and a bone-deep commitment to asking the most inconvenient question at the most inconvenient moment. Last week he asked me in the middle of the grocery store, at full volume, why some people are mean." He glanced at her. "I told him I'd get back to him on that one." Victoria smiled. Not the performance, the real one. He had seen both now, and the difference was the way it reached her eyes. "What did you tell him?" "I said sometimes people are mean because they're scared, and sometimes because they're hurting, and sometimes because nobody ever showed them they didn't have to be." He paused. "Then he asked if we could get Cocoa Puffs, and I said yes, and we moved on." She laughed, quietly, but fully. "You're a good father," she said. "I'm trying to be. That's not what most people say. Most people say I am, or I do my best. You said I'm trying to be." "That's different." He thought about it. "I know what a bad job would look like. I don't always know what a good one looks like, so I'm trying." The music from the band drifted over them, something slow and brass-heavy that the older couples were swaying to on the dance floor. The light from the chandelier moved across the walls. The crowd continued its elegant, expensive circulation. Evan and Victoria sat at the edge of it and talked. He didn't know how long they were there. An hour, maybe more. He had stopped tracking time somewhere around the point when she told him about the company, not the public version, not the press release version, but the actual version, which was harder and messier and more frightening than his balance profile had captured. Her father had started Sterling Technologies from a single patent when she was 12 years old. She had grown up watching him build it, the obsessive late nights, the deals made and lost, the pride and the terror in equal measure. When she was 26 and the company was already valued in the billions, her father had a first heart attack, the warning kind, and told her for the first time that she needed to be ready to lead it. She had been ready for 2 years when the second heart attack came and didn't leave him the same chance. The board was never fully on board with me, she said. She didn't seem to be talking to Evan so much as working through something, using the conversation as a space to think. He didn't mind. Some of them had known my father for 30 years. They'd watched me grow up. They thought they knew who I was before I did. And who did they think you were? A placeholder, she said. The daughter who would hold the chair warm until they could find someone more suitable. Suitable male, she said flatly, with a certain kind of background. With a wife and 2 kids, and a house in the right neighborhood, and a golf handicap, and all the accessories of a life that looks like it should be running something. Evan was quiet, and you don't have the accessories. I had a relationship. For 3 years, we got along. I thought it was working. She turned the champagne glass. The champagne was long gone. She was turning an empty glass. 8 weeks ago we ended it, publicly, as these things tend to go, when both people are somewhat visible. And the board has been, she paused. They've been watching. Watching for what? For a reason. She looked at him directly. They want to remove me. They have for a while. They're building a case, and the case they're building is that I'm unstable. That my personal life is unstable. That a company of this size needs a face. A particular kind of face, and mine isn't the right one without. She stopped herself. Evan waited. Without what? He asked. She looked at him for a long moment. Something was moving behind her eyes, calculation, but not the cold kind. The kind that comes when a decision you've been avoiding suddenly feels urgent. Without a husband, she said. The word landed in the space between them. Evan sat with it. That's insane, he said. It's 2024. They can't actually. They can't do it explicitly. They're sophisticated people. They'll do it through performance metrics and risk assessments and board confidence votes, and somewhere buried in the rationale will be language about stability and leadership continuity and public image. She set the glass down on the ledge between them. It's very legal. It's very practiced, and it will work if I let it. So what are you going to do? She was quiet for a long time. I don't know yet, she said, but the way she said it, the slight tension at the corners of her eyes, the deliberate quality of her stillness told him that wasn't quite true. She knew something. She was deciding something. He didn't push. He reached for a passing tray, without looking, found a glass of water, offered it to her, and she took it. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Marcus Webb appeared. There you are. Marcus was beaming, slightly flushed from dancing and champagne, Diane on his arm and glowing. I've been looking everywhere. Victoria, Evan, he stopped, looked between them with the abyss of a man registering something unexpected. You two know each other? We just met, Evan said. You've been talking for an hour and a half. Evan looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at Evan. Have we? She said. Marcus laughed. Diane, this is Evan, the guy I told you about, from Dayton. And Victoria Sterling, who you definitely know. Diane, warm and bright-eyed, shook hands with both of them. Are you enjoying yourselves? Very much, Victoria said, and to Evan's ear it sounded completely true. Marcus leaned down slightly to Evan's level, a conspiratorial tilt. I put you at table 7, which is the good table. Food's better, view's better, And the guy next to you sells vintage motorcycles, which I figured might actually interest you. It absolutely does. Marcus straightened, looked at Victoria. I hope my friend hasn't been boring you to death with workshop stories. The opposite, she said. Marcus looked between them again, the same registering look, and whatever he saw made him smile in a way that was just barely contained. He was smart enough not to say anything about it. That was why Evan had been his friend for 25 years. Table's going in 5 minutes, Marcus said. Go, be seated. Eat something. The salmon is unbelievable, I was told. He and Diane swept back toward the crowd. Evan and Victoria were alone again. They both stood from the ledge at the same moment. I'm at table 3, she said. Table 7, he said. A beat, Evan. She said his name like she was testing the weight of it. I'd like to pause. I'd like to keep talking. If you're open to it. Dessert? He said. Find me after the salmon. Something in her face softened in a way he didn't think she would have allowed a stranger to see an hour ago. After the salmon, she agreed. She walked away into the crowd, and people moved for her without being asked, the way crowds move for people who carry a certain mass of purpose. He watched her go. His phone buzzed. Noah texting from Miss Patterson's phone. Did you get cake yet? Evan smiled. Working on it, he typed back. He made his way to table 7. The salmon was in fact unbelievable. The man next to Evan did in fact sell vintage motorcycles, and they had a conversation about a 1,971 BSA Gold Star that ate up most of the main course in the best possible way. The table was good, a mix of people who turned out to be interesting, genuine, the kind of guests who were here because they mattered to Marcus personally rather than professionally. Evan relaxed for the first time all night, but he kept finding his eyes going to table 3. Victoria Sterling, in a room full of people, was a study in controlled presence. She spoke when spoken to, she smiled, she laughed. She was by any external measure entirely at ease. And he was beginning to understand exactly how much work it took to produce that appearance. After dessert was served a dark chocolate tower that elicited actual sounds of appreciation from his table. Evan folded his napkin, excused himself, and went looking for her. He found her near the dessert station, having apparently arrived there at the same moment via a different route. You moved fast for someone who looked like she was considering leaving, he said. I considered it. Then I remembered you said dessert. A man of my word. She looked at the dessert display, elaborate, architectural, absurd in the best way. This is unconscionable. Completely, he agreed. We should eat all of it. They didn't eat all of it. They took plates to a small table near the edge of the dance floor, close enough to the music to feel it, far enough away to hear each other. The conversation picked up exactly where it had left off, which was the mark of a real conversation, one that had been happening in the breaks between words, that didn't need to be restarted. Tell me something about Noah, she said. He looked at her. What do you want to know? Whatever you want to tell me. So he told her. About the Tuesday 2 months ago, when Noah had come home from school, upset because another kid had said his family wasn't real, because he didn't have a mom, and how Evan had sat him down and said, Our family is real because we're here, and we love each other, and love is the only thing that makes a family real, and don't let anyone tell you different. And Noah had listened very seriously and then said, Does that mean the family in the movie counts? And Evan had said, Which movie? And Noah had said, The one with the fish. And Evan had said, Nemo? Yeah, buddy, that family counts. Victoria laughed, and this time it wasn't quiet, it was real and full and surprised, and the woman at the next table glanced over with an expression of involuntary pleasure at the sound. He's magnificent, she said. He's everything, Evan said simply. And then she said something that surprised him. I've never wanted children because I didn't know what I'd be giving them, she said. I've seen the things I've given other people, the people who worked for me, the investors, the board. I give them results, I give them confidence, I give them the version of me that can deliver what they need. She paused. I don't know if I have anything else to give. That's not a decision you should make, based on what you're giving right now, Evan said. The version of you that would be someone's parent isn't the version you are in that boardroom. Those are different people, are they? They have to be. You can't run a company the way you raise a kid. With a kid, you can't optimize. You can't manage the outcome. You just show up, and show up again. And keep showing up even when it goes completely sideways. He looked at his hands around the dessert plate. I've been showing up for 6 years, and I still have no idea what I'm doing half the time. But I'm there. That's the whole thing. Victoria was quiet. You're there, she repeated. Every day. She looked at him, not evaluating, not calculating. Just looking. I've been in rooms with some of the most powerful men in the world, she said slowly. People who've built things, moved things, changed things. And I have never, she stopped, started, again, I have never had a conversation like this one. Because nobody asked if you liked your job, because nobody talked to me like I was a person first. The words settled. Evan didn't fill the silence immediately. He let it be what it was. Then he said, you are a person first. Whatever else you are on top of that. She looked away. Just for a moment, the chandelier light moved across her face, gold, then shadow, then gold again. When she looked back, something had changed, not in her expression. Something behind it, some calculation that had finally resolved itself into a decision. Evan, she said, I need to tell you something. The way she said it, careful, deliberate, like she was choosing every word before it left her, made him put down his fork. Okay, he said. She took a breath. I came to this wedding tonight because I was told to. Not by Marcus or Diane, I barely know them. I'm here through a business connection. I was told to come because the people who want to remove me from my company track, where I go and what I do and who I'm seen with. She paused. I was told that being seen at social events, appearing engaged with the world, appearing normal would help my case. I was also told, by my lawyer and my closest advisor, that the most effective thing I could do right now, the single most strategic move available to me, would be to present a stable relationship. Something the board couldn't use against me. She met his eyes. And I came here tonight, thinking I would find someone I already knew. Someone I could ask. And I didn't find them. She held his gaze. I found you instead. Evan was, Victoria, he said. What are you asking me? She said it plainly. No softening, no elaborate preamble. Just the words, set down between them like something real, and heavy, and true. I'm asking if you would be willing to marry me. The music from the band filled the silence. The chandelier turned. Somewhere across the room, Marcus Webb was dancing badly with his new wife, laughing. Evan Carter looked at the woman in front of him, this person he had known for 2 hours. This person who had just asked him the most unexpected question of his life and felt something move through him that he couldn't immediately name. Not shock. He had expected something, somewhere in the last hour. Some turn, some revelation. The conversation had been moving towards something. He had felt it the way he felt the grain of a piece of wood, telling him where the fault line was. Not fear. He was past the age where fear was the first response. He had survived things that reordered your relationship with fear. What he felt was the specific vertiginous clarity of a moment that divides time into before and after. He looked at Victoria Sterling. He thought about Noah. He thought about Claire. He thought about the suit he was wearing, bought for a funeral, and the truck in the parking garage 3 blocks away with the cracked window he had been meaning to fix for 2 years. And the workshop at home, with the smell of sawdust and the 6-month waiting list, and his whole life, his real, specific, unspectacular, deeply loved life. He thought about what it would mean to say no. He thought about what it would mean to say yes. He picked up his fork, took a bite of the chocolate tower. Tell me everything, he said. She did. And by the end of the night, Evan Carter, who had come to a wedding alone, who had almost stayed home, who had almost turned the truck around, who stood at the edge of a party where everyone else seemed to know their place, Evan Carter was engaged. But how they got from that table, moment, and what it cost both of them, and what it gave them, and what neither of them saw coming, that's a story for what comes next. She told him everything, not the press release version. Not the version her PR team had crafted over 3 carefully worded paragraphs. The real version, the one that kept her awake at 2 in the morning, the one she had never said out loud in a room where anyone could use it against her. The board had 12 members. 7 of them had been appointed during her father's tenure. Of those 7, 4 had voted against confirming her as permanent CEO when her father died, and had been quiet about it ever since, in the way that people are quiet when they lose a vote, but don't change their position. They had simply waited, watched, kept their powder dry, which was the term her lawyer used, and which Evan thought sounded exactly like something people said when they were planning to shoot someone. The company's quarterly numbers came in flat last month, Victoria said. Not bad, not declining, flat. In any other context, flat would be acceptable. The sector is contracting. Our competitors are down 8 to 12%. We held ground. But flat isn't a story that protects me. That is a story that gives them room. Room to do what exactly? To call a confidence vote. It requires 6 board members to initiate. I believe they have 5. They need 1 more, and I believe they're working on it. She paused. If they call a vote and I lose it, I lose the CEO position. My shares don't protect me. My father structured the ownership so that the board has operational authority. He trusted them. He didn't anticipate. She stopped. He didn't anticipate a lot of things. So it's a numbers game. It's a perception game. The numbers are just the language they're using. She turned the empty champagne glass, again a habit, Evan had noticed, that appeared when she was working through something difficult. The narrative they're building is that I'm a liability. Personally unstable, too singular, no roots, nothing that anchors her to anything beyond herself. She said it in a slightly different voice, mimicking, he realized, the way someone else had actually said it. Those are words from a leaked internal email my lawyer obtained last week. Nothing that anchors her to anything beyond herself, Evan repeated slowly. Yes, and you think a husband. I think a husband changes the story. Not for me, I know who I am. But for the 5 people who are undecided, for the institutional investors who read the coverage, for the profile pieces that will come out when this goes public, it changes the narrative. She looked at him steadily. It's cynical. I know it's cynical, but it's also true, and I've been in this business long enough to know that true and cynical aren't mutually exclusive. Evan absorbed this. What's the timeline? He asked. The next board meeting is in 8 weeks. If they're going to make a move, it happens there. I need something in place before then, something meaning a marriage. Something meaning a credible relationship with forward momentum. An engagement announced before the board meeting publicly, visibly, would be enough to shift the narrative. By the time the vote was called, if it was called, the story would already be written. She set the glass down. People don't vote to remove a CEO who just got engaged. It reads as stability. It reads as human, Evan said. She looked at him. It reads as human, he said again. That's what they think you're missing. A silence. Yes, she said, and something in the word was tired, in a way that went past the night, past the board, past the whole elaborate machinery of her professional survival. Just tired, the way you get tired of having to prove you're a person. Evan looked at the chocolate tower on his plate. He had been eating it while she talked, not because he was casual about what she was telling him, but because he was a man who had learned to do 2 things at once, and one of those things was listen, without making listening into a performance. How many people know you were considering this? He asked. The husband's strategy. My lawyer, my advisor, who is also my oldest friend, and who will want to run a comprehensive background check on any candidate before. She stopped. Before anything is agreed to. A background check. He absorbed this without visible offense. That's reasonable. I'd want one too in your position. She looked at him slightly differently, like she had been prepared for him to bristle at that, and he hadn't. You'd find a carpenter from Dayton, Ohio, he said. 1 DUI when I was 19, which I'm not proud of, nothing since. Married at 26, widowed at 27, 1 son, 6 years old, legally mine, healthy, happy, good kid. Workshop business in good standing, no debt beyond a mortgage I'm 3 years into. No lawsuits, no skeletons, he paused. The truck has a crack in the window. That's the worst thing I can tell you. Victoria looked at him. You're not surprised, she said, by any of this. By what I'm asking. I'm surprised, he said. I'm just not the kind of person who expresses surprise by making it everyone's problem. Most men would have laughed by now, or gotten up, or tried to negotiate something. Most men aren't me. That landed, she absorbed it. No, she said quietly. They're not. He put down his fork, looked at her directly. Before I say anything else, I need you to understand something. I have a 6-year-old son. He is not part of any arrangement. He is not a prop, he is not a narrative. He is not something you use in a photo opportunity, and then manage. He is a kid. If anything you're proposing touches him in a way that isn't real and isn't good for him, we're done. Before we start, do you understand that? The answer came without hesitation. Yes, I mean it, Victoria. I know you do. She held his gaze. And for what it's worth, the fact that your first condition is about your son and not about money tells me more than a background check could. Evan nodded. Once, what are you offering, practically? A legal agreement, drafted by my lawyer, reviewed by anyone you want to retain. You'd move to Chicago, your son would come with you. Obviously, the best schools, everything covered. Your business would be supported, not shut down, whatever space and resources you need. A financial arrangement that protects you, regardless of outcome. And when the period ends, when does it end? That's negotiable. I was thinking 1 year minimum. If the board's situation resolves, if the company stabilizes, we could begin a mutual, amicable. She seemed to catch herself looking for a corporate word and consciously chose a human one instead. We'd part ways, legally, cleanly, without drama. You'd be taken care of. So would Noah. Evan was quiet for a long time. The band was playing something slower now. The dance floor had thinned out slightly, the older guests drifting toward their tables, the younger ones filling the space. At table 7, the vintage motorcycle man was laughing loudly at something, head thrown back. Tell me something, Evan said, and I want the real answer, not the strategic answer. All right, is there any part of you, any part at all, that considered this might end up being something more than an arrangement? The pause was short, but it was there. I've learned not to count on things I can't control, she said. That's a strategic answer. Another pause, longer. Yes, she said finally. There's a part, a small part. That noticed when you sat down next to me and handed me a glass of something you didn't know the name of and talked to me like I was just a woman at a party. She stopped. I noticed that I felt like a person. For the first time in a while, she looked at the table. I didn't expect to notice that tonight. Of all the things I expected from tonight, that wasn't one of them. Evan picked up his water glass, drank, set it down. I'm going to need a few days, he said. I need to think. I need to talk to someone I trust, and I need to figure out how to explain whatever this is to a 6-year-old in a way that doesn't confuse him. He met her eyes. But I'm not saying no. Victoria Sterling, who had faced down boardrooms and the full weight of an industry that had never quite decided she was welcome, let out a breath. It was the breath of someone who had been holding it for longer than just this conversation. That's enough for tonight, she said. Yeah. He glanced across the room, found Marcus still on the dance floor, still grinning. It's enough. He drove home through the dark with the windows cracked and the radio off. The Illinois landscape beyond the highway was nothing but black in both directions. And Evan drove through it in the particular silence of a man who has had a very large thing dropped into the middle of his ordinary life and is still determining the shape of the crater. He had Noah's backpack in the truck. He had picked his son up from Miss Patterson's on the way out of the city, and Noah had climbed in still warm from sleep, clutching a stuffed dog named Gerald, and was out again before they'd gone 2 miles. Evan glanced in the rearview mirror at his sleeping son and felt the familiar rush of it, fierce and simple, and the realest thing in his life. He looked back at the road. A carpenter from Dayton, Ohio. She had asked him to marry her. He tried to hold those 2 sentences in the same space in his mind, and kept failing. They refused to coexist naturally. They kept colliding into something that sounded like the setup of a joke, except he couldn't find where the punchline was supposed to land. But the thing was, and this was the thing he kept returning to, the thing he couldn't argue his way around, it hadn't felt like a joke. Sitting there with her, in that improbable corner of an impossibly expensive evening, Talking the way people talk when the performing stops, it hadn't felt like anything other than two people being honest with each other. And honesty, in Evan's experience, was the rarest currency. He thought about what she had said, about being a surface that things happen on, about the boardroom, and the votes, and the men who had been waiting 6 years to reclaim something they believed was rightfully theirs. He thought about her father, and the company built from a patent, and a daughter who had spent her entire adult life to step into a space that had never been built to hold her. He thought, that's loneliness of a specific and brutal kind. He knew loneliness. He knew the kind you carried quietly while the world assumed you were fine because you kept showing up. He knew the weight of being the only person responsible for someone else, the strange vertigo of being both anchor and adrift. He hadn't expected to recognize anything in a billionaire CEO in a midnight blue gown. He had recognized everything. By the time he pulled into his driveway, he still hadn't made a decision. But he had made room for one, which was further than he'd been when he got in the truck. He carried Noah inside without waking him, took off his small shoes, pulled the blanket up, stood in the doorway, looking at the sleeping shape of his son in the nightlight glow for a long moment. "What do you think, bud?" he said quietly, to no one. To both of them. "You think we're ready for something different?" Noah slept. Evan closed the door. In the morning, after the school run, after the workshop was open and the smell of sawdust had gotten into his clothes the way it always did, he called his sister. Renee was 41, a high school history teacher, 3 kids, a husband who coached Little League, a house 20 minutes from Evan's that she referred to as controlled chaos. She was the person he called when he needed someone who would listen all the way to the end before opening her mouth, and who would then be completely, uncomfortably honest with him. "You're going to tell me it's insane," he said. "I am absolutely going to tell you it's insane," Renee said. "I'm also going to ask you some questions first. Okay. Did she seem like she was lying to you about any of it?" He thought, really thought. He was a man who had learned to read things: wood, structure, the underlying logic of how materials behaved. He had been watching Victoria all night, watching the difference between her performed self and her real self, and when she had told him about the board and the vote and the reason behind the proposal, the mask had been fully down. "No," he said. "Did she seem like someone who was looking for a target, someone to take advantage of?" The opposite. She seemed like someone who was used to people taking advantage of her and was trying to be completely transparent, so I couldn't accuse her of it later. Okay, he could hear Renee thinking. "And Noah? My first condition was that Noah doesn't get used." She agreed immediately. People agree to things immediately when they want something. She agreed in a specific way, Evan said, like she'd already thought about it. Like it was a condition she would have set herself. A pause. "What do you actually want, Evan?" He looked at the piece of walnut on his workbench. He had been roughing out a dining table leg for the past hour, working the wood around this conversation, and there was a knot in the grain he was going to have to work carefully around, or it would become a fault line. "I want Noah to have a better shot," he said. "I want to stop calculating every month whether we're going to make it comfortably or just barely. He stopped, started differently. "Do you know what I thought about on the drive home last night? I thought about Noah's college fund. I started it 2 years ago. I put in $40 a month. $40. By the time he's 18, it'll be. Evan, I know it won't be enough. I know that. And I don't lose sleep over it because there's nothing I can do about it that I'm not already doing. But I thought about it last night, driving home, and I thought, what if it was different? What if that wasn't a calculation I had to make?" A long silence. "She's rich," Renee said finally. "That doesn't make her trustworthy." "No, but last night I don't know how to explain this. Last night, she was the most real person in a room full of very polished people. I've met people who have money, and mostly it has made them less real. More like a surface. She said that herself, that she felt like a surface. And the fact that she felt it, that she could name it, that's not nothing." Renee was quiet for a while. "Can I say something that might make you mad?" "Go ahead. I think you liked her, not as a strategy." Just you like talking to her. And I think that's the part you're trying to convince yourself is irrelevant. And it's not. Evan set the tool down on the workbench. She asked me to marry her, he said. As a business arrangement. There's a contract. A timeline. A defined endpoint. I heard you the first time. That's not I can't go into something like this, thinking. I know, Renee said. I'm just saying. Notice what you noticed. Keep track of it. She paused. Are you going to call her? She gave me her number before I left. Personal cell! Not through an assistant. That's something. I thought so too. He called her, on Tuesday. He had spent Sunday thinking, Monday working, and by Tuesday morning he had come to the only conclusion that felt honest. He needed more information. Not more time to decide in the abstract, but actual information. Facts, details, the thing in its real shape, not the outline from that first night. She answered on the second ring. No assistant, no intermediary. Just her voice direct and clear. Evan, I have questions, he said. Not a yes, not a no yet, just questions, ask them. He had written them down in the back of a receipts notebook because it was the closest paper he'd had at 5 in the morning. He read from the list without embarrassment. What would this actually look like for Noah? School, daily life, routine. I need specifics, not assurances. Chicago's public school system has several excellent options near where I live. My neighborhood is family-oriented, not the way people say that to mean expensive, but actually. There are kids his age nearby. There are parks. She paused. I'd want him to feel like he lived there, not like he was visiting. My business, the waiting list, the clients, the work, it's not something I can just pause. I have a carriage house behind the main building that was built as a studio. It's empty. It would need some modification to work as a workshop, but structurally it's sound. Another pause. I had someone look at it this morning. Evan stopped. You had someone look at it this morning? I wanted to be able to give you a specific answer when you asked. He held the phone for a moment. He started. Presumptuous, she said. I know, I've been told I'm presumptuous. I was going to say thorough, a brief silence. My clients, he continued. The projects I have in progress. I can't disappear on them. You don't have to. The geographic distance is manageable. Your work is high-end, right? The clients are coming to you for the craft. That doesn't change if you're based in Chicago instead of Dayton. Legal agreement. I want my own lawyer. I assumed you would. I'll have my lawyer send the initial draft to whoever you designate. It should cover all exit terms, financial arrangements, Noah's provisions, and a mutual non-disclosure that protects both of us. She paused. I want you protected, Evan. Not just me. If this goes wrong in any direction, I want you to be standing on solid ground. He looked at his son's drawing on the refrigerator, a picture Noah had made at school of their family, which consisted of a large yellow figure he'd labeled DAD and a smaller blue figure he'd labeled me and a dog they did not own, but Noah remained optimistic about. The personal part, Evan said. What does that look like? Day to day. What do you mean? I mean, we'd be living in the same house. We'd be presenting a certain thing to the world. What does that look like when the cameras aren't there? What are the rules? She thought about this for a moment. I'd want us to try, not perform try. I'd want us to have dinner together when we're both home. I'd want to know Noah, actually know him, not just be the person who lives in the house. And she seemed to find this harder. I'd want you to talk to me the way you talked to me Saturday night. Not because it's required, because it's the only way either of this works. The only way what works? Any of it, she said. The public part and she stopped. The other part. He understood what she meant by the other part. The part that wasn't the contract. The part that had been happening already, at the edge of someone else's wedding, over chocolate towers and empty champagne glasses. Okay, he said. One more thing, go ahead. I want to meet you again. In person, not a hotel, not a business setting, somewhere normal. I want to see what this looks like outside of Saturday night. Because Saturday night was not a normal environment, and I don't want to make a decision based on a context that isn't real. She was quiet for a moment. Where are you thinking? You've ever been to a diner? I've been to restaurants that describe themselves as A real diner. Formica counters. Coffee that comes in a brown pot. Pie that's either excellent or terrible, and there's no way to tell until you try it. A long pause. No, she said, I haven't. Saturday. Noon, I'll send you an address. Another pause. All right, she said. Evan's regular diner was called Marcy's. It was on a corner 3 blocks from his workshop. It had been there since 1987, and it smelled like the same thing it had always smelled, like coffee, bacon grease, and something sweet that might have been pie or might have been Marcy herself, who was now 83 and still worked the morning shift on Saturdays because she said idleness was for people who hadn't found anything worth doing. He got there first. He had Noah with him, which was partially a logistical reality of Saturday morning, and partially, he admitted to himself, a choice. He wanted to see how she was with his son, outside of the controlled environment of a statement. Anyone could say the right things. What mattered was what happened in an ordinary moment, with an ordinary 6-year-old who had no filter and no patience for pretense. Noah was in a booth across from Evan, systematically demolishing a short stack of pancakes, when the door opened and Victoria Sterling walked in. She was wearing jeans and a simple dark sweater, hair down. No jewelry except small earrings. She looked different, more so than Evan would have expected. Less structured, more present. Marcy, at the counter, did not look up from the pot she was washing. Victoria stood for a moment at the entrance, taking in the diner with an expression that was somewhere between uncertain and genuinely curious, and then she spotted Evan's booth and walked over. Noah looked up from his pancakes. Hi, he said. Hi, she said. I'm Noah, I'm Victoria. Noah considered this. That's a long name. It is. You can call me V if you want. People have called me that before. Noah thought about it. Okay, V. He went back to his pancakes, the matter settled, and Evan watched Victoria process the particular gift of being found acceptable by a 6-year-old in approximately 12 seconds. She slid into the booth across from Evan. Marcy arrived 30 seconds later with a pot of the brown coffee, set 2 cups down without asking, and left. Victoria looked at her cup, looked at Evan. Don't overthink it, he said. It's just coffee. She picked it up, drank, and made a face that was so instinctively, unguardedly human that Evan had to stop himself from laughing. It's terrible, he confirmed, but in a specific way that grows on you. Give it time. Noah, without looking up, Dad has 3 cups every time we come here. That's true, Evan said, and I stand by it. Victoria set her cup down, with a slightly dazed expression, and looked at the menu, which was a laminated sing-sheet that had a photograph of a slice of pie on the front that might have been taken in 1994. What's good, she asked. Eggs are reliable. The pie is a gamble. I recommend the gamble. What kind? Whatever Marcy made this morning. I'll ask. He caught Marcy's eye across the diner, and she raised one finger. She appeared to be talking to another regular, and was not to be interrupted, and then held up 4 fingers. 4-berry, Evan translated. I'll try it, Victoria said. Noah looked up. I want pie too. You're eating pancakes. I can eat both. You absolutely cannot eat both. You don't know that. I 100% know that. Noah turned to Victoria with the specific expression children use when they have identified a potential ally. What do you think? Victoria looked at Noah, looked at the pancakes, which were approximately half demolished. Looked at Evan. I think, she said carefully, that this is a conversation between you and your dad, and I am going to stay completely out of it. Noah considered this. That's smart. Thank you. Evan looked at her across the table. She had handled that exactly right, not winning Noah over with indulgence, not deferring to Evan in a way that was performative, just finding the honest line and holding it. He noted that, filed it. How was your week, he asked. My CFO had a mild crisis on Thursday that turned out to be entirely manageable. My board liaison sent me 3 passive-aggressive emails that said nothing while implying everything. And I had my first full night of sleep in 2 weeks on Friday. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. You? Finished a dining table I've been working on for 6 weeks. Quarter sawn white oak had this grain pattern in the centerboard that I didn't know what to do with for the first 3 weeks, and then it told me what it wanted, and he made a gesture. Got out of the way, it told you. The wood tells you. If you're listening. She looked at him. I've had that feeling exactly once. When I restructured the company's product division 3 years ago, everyone told me it was wrong, and I kept looking at the structure, and it just... She paused. It told me it wanted to go in a different direction. And you got out of the way? Eventually, I fought it first. A slight smile. I fight most things first, I noticed. Is that a problem? No, I just know what to factor in. Marcy arrived with a plate of eggs for Evan, a slice of 4-berry pie for Victoria, and an expression that communicated, without words, that she had clocked this new person and formed an opinion and was not yet sharing it. Victoria looked at the pie. It was a large slice, deep purple filling, a lattice crust that was golden and slightly uneven in the way that homemade things are uneven. She took a bite. Noah watched her with the frank scientific interest of a person running an experiment. Her expression changed. Something in the eyes first, then the whole face. Oh, she said. Yeah, Evan said. That's I know. She looked at the pie, like it had done something to her. Then she looked at Evan. Then she laughed, that real one, the one that came from somewhere unguarded and surprised. You brought me to a diner to show me pie, she said. I brought you to a diner to have a real conversation, see, he said. The pie is supplementary, but it's good to know what matters to you. She looked at him steadily. And what did you just learn? She asked. That you're a person who can be surprised by something simple. He picked up his fork. That's not small. She was quiet for a moment. Around them, the diner moved at its Saturday morning pace, the counter full, the booths occupied, the sound of plates and conversation and Marcy's voice cutting clearly through it all as she held court over her domain. What did you tell your sister? Victoria asked. He looked up. What makes you think I talked to my sister? You seem like someone who has a person they talk to. And the person felt like a sister. You're perceptive. Occupational hazard. He thought about what to say. Chose honesty, because it was the only currency he had that was worth anything. I told her I wasn't saying no, he said. She told me I liked you, and that I was trying to pretend that was irrelevant. Victoria went very still. And is it, she asked, irrelevant? Noah had finished his pancakes, and was now drawing on a paper napkin with a crayon that had materialized from his jacket pocket. He was narrating the drawing under his breath in a private language that Evan had learned not to interrupt. No, Evan said. It's not irrelevant. Another stillness. Evan, she said, I need you to understand something clearly. The arrangement I'm proposing, I built it on purpose to be clean. To have edges, an exit point, because I don't think it's fair to ask someone to step into my life without giving them a guaranteed way out. She paused. But that also means I've structured it, specifically, so that, she chose the next words carefully. So that feelings aren't part of the requirement. I'm not asking you to feel anything. What if I already do? She looked at him. You've known me for 4 days, she said. I knew in about 40 minutes, he said. Not what kind of feelings, I couldn't tell you that. But that there was something worth paying attention to. He looked at his coffee. You can build a contract around a business arrangement. You can't build one around what you feel when someone talks to you in a certain way. That's got to be its own thing, separate from the structure. That's complicated. Everything worth anything is complicated. She looked out the window for a moment. Outside, a couple was walking a dog. A teenager rode past on a bike. The world was proceeding at its Saturday pace, indifferent and continuous. I've spent my entire adult life, she said slowly, not letting things be complicated. Simplifying, structuring, containing. It's the only way I know how to protect myself. I know, Evan said. I can see that. I'm not asking you to stop. He looked for the word. I'm saying there might be a part of this that doesn't fit in the structure. And I think we should both be honest about that going in. A long silence. Noah looked up from his napkin drawing. Yeah, Bud. I drew you and V. He held up the napkin. It showed 2 large figures, side by side, with enormous heads and very small arms. That one's you, that one's V. He pointed to one that had what appeared to be a crown. I gave her a crown because she has a fancy name. Victoria looked at the drawing for a moment. Then she said, Can I keep it? Noah considered the gravity of the request. His drawings were, in his own estimation, significant works. Okay, he finally conceded, but be careful with it. I will be, she said, I promise. She folded the napkin with both hands, precisely, carefully, and put it in her jacket pocket. And Evan watched his son watch her do it, with the total, unsentimental attention of a child who is determining whether a person means what they say, and watched Noah's face make a decision. He turned back to his new drawing, accepted. Evan looked at Victoria. She was looking at him. Yes, he said. She blinked. Yes, I'm saying yes. He kept his voice level, unhurried. We'll review the contract. I'll get my lawyer involved. We'll sort the details. But my answer is yes. Victoria Sterling looked at Evan Carter in a booth at Marcy's Diner on a Saturday morning, holding a cup of genuinely terrible coffee and a napkin drawing by a 6-year-old who had given her a crown because she had a fancy name. And for a moment, just a moment, something in her face went entirely unguarded. Not the exhausted mask, not the polished performance. Not even the careful, calibrated honesty she had offered him over the past 4 days. Just her. Just the person underneath all of it, surprised to find herself here, surprised to feel if he was reading her right, and he thought he was something that resembled relief. Okay, she said. That was all. Just okay. Marcy appeared at the table with the brown coffee pot. You want more? She asked. To both of them. She had apparently made her assessment. Please, Evan said. Yes, Victoria said. Thank you. Marcy poured, looked at Noah's drawing, made a sound that was either approval or general commentary on the state of things. You need anything else? She asked. Evan looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at Evan. We're good, he said. We've got everything we need. The announcement went out on a Wednesday morning at precisely 9 a.m. through Victoria's official communications team. It was 3 sentences, measured, clean, professional. Victoria Sterling, CEO of Sterling Technologies, was pleased to announce her engagement to Evan Carter of Dayton, Ohio. The couple had met through mutual friends and had been getting to know each other privately over recent weeks. They asked for the public's respect of their personal lives as they planned for their future together. By 9:15, it was the top trending topic in 4 states. By noon, it was national. Evan was in his workshop when Renee called. He had the phone on the bench beside him, had been watching the notifications stack up for 2 hours without opening any of them, and had been focusing on the piece of wood in front of him because the piece of wood required his full attention and did not care about trending topics. It's everywhere, Renee said without preamble. I know. There are reporters outside your house. He set the tool down slowly. How many? I counted 4 vans from the workshop window. A woman with a microphone tried to talk to me in the parking lot of the Kroger. She thought I was you. You're 5'2" and female. I told her that. She said she was very sorry, and could she ask me a few questions anyway. Evan put both hands flat on the workbench and breathed. He had known this was coming. Victoria had warned him. Her communications team had briefed him. He had made specific arrangements for Noah. His sister was picking him up from school, taking him to her house, keeping him away from the house until the initial surge passed. He had thought he was prepared. He had not been fully prepared. Are you okay? Renee asked. I'm thinking. That's not what I asked. I know. He looked at the wood. White oak, same project as before, the grain he had finally figured out. The table was taking shape now, the logic of it clear. I'm okay. Just recalibrating, Evan. There are people on the internet saying you married her for money. There are people on the internet saying she's using you for a PR stunt. There's a man on some website who claims to have gone to high school with you and says, and I'm quoting, Ivan was always a smooth operator. Who said that? I don't know. Do you know anyone named Dirtbike Danny? I genuinely do not. Then ignore it. Renee's voice went quieter. The bad stuff is loud. I'm just making sure you heard it so you're not blindsided. I heard it. He picked the tool back up. Thanks, Reen. Noah's safe with me. Don't come until it settles down. I know. Thank you. He set the phone face down on the bench, put on his safety glasses, and went back to work. Because the table still needed to be built. Because the wood didn't care about the internet. Because there were things that mattered and things that made noise, and the job in front of him was one of the things that mattered. Victoria called at 2 in the afternoon. "The media response is larger than we projected," she said. The professional voice efficient, assessing, but underneath it he could hear something else. A tightness she was managing. "Is that a problem for the board plan?" "No, it's actually the coverage is more sympathetic than we expected. The single father angle is," she paused. "My communications team is calling it a gift." "A gift," Evan repeated. "I know how that sounds." "How does it sound to you?" A silence. "It sounds like I'm using your life as a press strategy," she said. It's not how I think about it. But I understand that the effect is the same, and I'm sorry for that." He leaned against the workbench. "Victoria, we walked into this with our eyes open. Both of us. I'm not going to pretend I didn't know my life would become part of the story. I did know. I said yes anyway. Why? It wasn't a strategy question. It was the real one, the one she'd been carrying since Saturday, since the diner, since the moment he had said yes, without a flinch. Because the math made sense, he said, and because Noah's college fund should be more than $40 a month. And because he stopped, found the honest thing. Because you said nobody had ever asked you if you liked your job, and that stayed with me. The whole drive home, that one thing." The line was quiet for a moment. "The formal paperwork is ready for your lawyer," she said finally. "Whenever you're ready to proceed, I'll call him today. There's one more thing." Her voice shifted slightly. "The board has requested a dinner. Formal. They want to meet you." Evan absorbed this. "When? 3 weeks. It's they want to assess the relationship." "Assess you." She said it plainly, because she had learned, in 4 days, that Evan appreciated plain. "Some of them are going to be hostile. Some are going to be condescending. I want you to know that before you walk in. What do they expect me to do? Fall apart?" "They expect you to feel small," she said. "They're very good at making people feel small." "I build things with my hands," Evan said. "That's the least small thing I know how to be." A brief silence. "Yes, it is." The move happened 3 weeks later. Evan rented a truck, not the old green pickup, an actual moving truck, the kind with the ramp, and he and his neighbor Phil, who was 67 and had helped Evan with every major physical task since Claire died, loaded it over the course of a Saturday morning. The workshop tools went last, carefully padded, in a sequence that Evan had planned in his notebook, because they were the most irreplaceable things he owned. Noah ran between the house and the truck approximately 40 times, contributing almost nothing and generating enormous amounts of noise and enthusiasm. "I'm helping," Noah announced. "You're helping," Phil agreed, moving out of the way as Noah sprinted past, carrying one small box that contained his own belongings, 3 books, a drawing pad, 12 crayons, and Gerald the stuffed dog. "That's the last box," Noah reported. "That's the 3rd box you've declared the last box," Evan said. "This time it's really the last one. Put it in the truck, bud." Noah ran. Phil looked at Evan. Phil was a man of considerable economy of expression. In 5 years of neighboring, Evan had learned that Phil said exactly what he meant, and nothing more, which was a quality Evan respected. "You good?" Phil asked, working on it. "She good to you?" "Getting there," Phil nodded. This was apparently sufficient. He picked up the last properly sized box and headed for the truck. Evan stood in the empty living room for a moment. The walls had the pale outlines where pictures used to hang. The floor had the indentations where the furniture had been. The room had that particular echo of a space that has held a life and was now in between. He had moved into this house when Noah was 2, after Claire. When he needed to not be in the apartment, where everything still smelled like her. This house had been the next chapter, the one he hadn't chosen so much as arrived at, by necessity. And it had become something. Home, real home, the kind you build by accumulating ordinary days in a specific place. He thought about that. About what home was, and whether it was a place or a habit or just the people you were in it with. Then Noah appeared in the doorway. "Dad, we're gonna be late. We have 6 hours of driving ahead of us. We can't be late." "Gerald wants to get there. Gerald is a stuffed dog." "Gerald has feelings." Evan looked at his son, small and certain in the doorway. Backpack on, Gerald tucked under one arm, completely unafraid of the new thing. 6 years old, and moving to Chicago to live with a woman he'd met 3 weeks ago in a diner, and his biggest concern was that a stuffed dog's feelings should be considered. "Let's go," Evan said. Victoria's house was in Lincoln Park, not a mansion, which Evan had half expected and half braced for, but a large brownstone on a tree-lined street that managed to be substantial without being ostentatious. It had a carriage house in the back, which was already in the process of being converted to workshop space. The people doing the conversion had been there a week and were approximately 2/3 done. When the moving truck pulled up, Victoria was standing at the front door. Jeans again, a light jacket, her hair pulled back. She had clearly been waiting, but had self-possession not to look like she'd been waiting. Noah was out of the truck before it fully stopped. "Is that our house?" he demanded, pointing. "It is," Victoria said. "It's big. It's big enough for all three of us." Noah looked at it with a 6-year-old's proprietary appraisal. "Does it have a yard?" "A small one in the back." "Can I see it right now?" "Yes." She looked at Evan. Evan made a gesture that said, "Go ahead." And Victoria led a 6-year-old through her house to show him the yard, while Evan and Phil began unloading the moving truck, because sometimes the most important things happened in the middle of the most ordinary logistics. When Evan carried the first load, inside 20 minutes later, he could hear Noah's voice from the back of the house, rapid, informational, the tone he used when he was telling someone something he considered significant. He caught fragments, "And this is where I would put the fort. And if we had a dog, the dog could live there." He put the box down and stood in Victoria's entryway, their entryway. He was supposed to be adjusting to that word, and listened to the sound of his son negotiating the future with a woman he had known for 3 weeks. He thought, this might actually work. The first 2 weeks were the adjustment period. That was what Evan called it in his head, because naming a thing made it manageable. Noah started at his new school on a Monday. He came home that afternoon and told Evan there was a boy in his class, named Theo, who had a dog and a hamster, and this was considered very impressive by Noah, who had lobbied for a dog for 2 years. "How was the rest of it?" Evan asked. Noah thought about it with the gravity he applied to important assessments. "Good. Mrs. Paulson is nice. She lets you pick your seat." "That's good." I sat next to Theo, strategic dad. "Can we get a dog now?" "Noah, I'm just asking. The answer is the same as it was last week." "What if I ask V?" Evan pointed at his son. "Do not use divide-and-conquer tactics on me. I see exactly what you're doing." Noah's expression managed to be simultaneously guilty and completely unrepentant, which was a skill Evan had been observing with fascination for years. The workshop was operational by the end of the second week. The carriage house conversion had been done well, proper lighting, ventilation, outlets in the right places, a drainage system in the floor for the finishing work. Whoever Victoria had hired for it had listened to the specifications Evan had sent. He stepped into it that first morning and ran his hand along the workbench. Oak with a slight warp he would have sanded down differently, but solid. Well made, someone had cared. He sent her a text, "The workshop is excellent." "Thank you." Her reply came back fast. "I sent them your email about the drainage system 3 times. I wanted to make sure they got it right." He looked at his phone for a moment. Then he went to work. Victoria got home most evenings between 7 and 8. Sometimes later. On the evenings she made it by 7:30. She and Evan and Noah ate dinner together. Evan cooked, because he was better at it and because the activity gave him something to do with his hands while he decompressed from the day. The first time this happened, Noah set the table with excessive enthusiasm and arranged the silverware in a configuration that was historically unprecedented. And Victoria straightened her fork without commenting on the knife being on the wrong side, which Evan clocked and filed. "How was the board meeting?" he asked, putting a plate in front of her. She looked at it. Pasta with something he'd made from what was in the refrigerator, which had turned out better than expected. "How do you know I had a board meeting? You've had your jacket on for 6 hours straight. You take it off in the car. You only keep it on when you've been in formal meetings all day. and haven't had time to decompress. She looked at her jacket, looked at him, took the jacket off and hung it on the back of her chair. It was fine, she said. Fine like actually fine. Or fine like the building is structurally sound but you noticed cracks. She picked up her fork, the second one. Which cracks? Hargrove. She said the name like a word in a language she was tired of speaking. He asked 3 questions that were technically about Q3 projections and were actually about my decision-making process during my breakup. He was very skilled about it. What did you say? I answered the surface questions and didn't react to the subtext. She paused. I'm very skilled about it, too. Noah was eating with total concentration, which meant he was listening to everything. What subtext? He asked, not looking up. It's when someone says one thing but means something else, Evan said. Noah considered this. Like when you say we'll see but you mean no? Exactly like that. That's sneaky, it can be. Noah looked at Victoria. Is someone being sneaky to you at work? She looked at the boy, this small, direct person who had just cut to the center of the thing in about 4 words. A little bit, she said. You should tell them to stop. I'm working on it. Noah went back to his pasta, apparently satisfied that the matter was in hand. Evan caught Victoria's eye across the table. She had an expression he was learning to recognize, the one she got when something cracked the composed exterior unexpectedly, and she was deciding whether to be rattled by it or let it in. She let it in. This is very good, she said, nodding at the food. What is it? Pantry pasta. I made it up, you made it up. It's a style. You work with what's there. She was quiet for a moment. Then my father cooked. Not well, but enthusiastically. A pause. I forgot that until just now. Evan didn't make it into a moment. He just nodded and passed her the parmesan, and she took it. And the conversation moved on, and the things she'd remembered stayed in the room without being examined, which was sometimes the right way to handle things. The formal board dinner was held at a private club in the Gold Coast that looked exactly as Evan had expected: old money, dark wood, the particular hush of a space designed to make you feel watched. Victoria had briefed him the night before. 12 board members, though not all would attend. She expected 7 or 8. The most important to watch, Hargrove, the one she'd mentioned at dinner. And a woman named Patricia Cho, who was undecided and whose vote could go either direction. What do you want me to do? He asked. Be exactly who you are. That's not very specific. It's the most specific thing I can tell you. These people are very good at detecting performance. If you try to present something, they'll find the seam. She looked at him. The reason you're useful to me is that you're real. Don't stop being real, because the room is expensive. He had looked at his suit, the same one, the funeral suit. I need a different suit, he said. I'll get one, he said. I'm going to get it. He had gone to a department store, not the kind she would have sent him to, and bought one that fit properly across the shoulders. Not expensive by the standards of the world they were moving in. But his, chosen by him with money he had made with his hands, and that mattered to him in a way he couldn't entirely explain and didn't try to. He wore it to the dinner, and she had looked at him when he came downstairs and said, simply, good. That was enough. The dinner was a performance. He understood that walking in, everyone in the room was performing some version of themselves, the powerful ones performing confidence, the uncertain ones performing certainty, and all of them performing interest in the man beside Victoria Sterling while actually conducting an assessment. Evan ate his food and let himself be assessed. The early part of the dinner was relatively easy. He talked to the man on his left, whose name was Whitmore, about the craft of furniture making. And Whitmore turned out to have an unexpected, genuine interest in woodworking, a hobby he'd abandoned at 30 for the demands of a finance career, and they had a real conversation that drew the attention of the 2 people across the table. Patricia Cho was watching him from 3 seats down with an expression that was neutral and sharp. She was 60 or so, silver-haired, with the posture of someone who had been in rooms like this for decades and had learned to take up exactly the space she chose and no more. She had not spoken directly to him yet. Hargrove had spoken to him once, briefly, a too firm handshake at the beginning, and a question about where Evan had gone to school that was phrased politely and landed like an elbow. Ohio State, Evan had said. 2 years. I left to take care of my son after his mother died. I finished the degree online. A pause. I see, do you? Evan had held the man's gaze without aggression, without apology. Just held it. The way you hold a piece of wood steady when you're assessing whether it's true. Hargrove had moved on. Near the end of the main course, Patricia Cho leaned forward and spoke across the table. Mr. Carter, how did you two actually meet? Victoria had started to answer the prepared version, the one the communications team had approved, and Evan spoke first. At Marcus Webb's wedding, I was there for my best friend. She was there for business. We ended up in the same corner of a ballroom, where neither of us quite belonged, and we talked for about 2 hours. He looked at Cho directly. I didn't know who she was for at least the first 40 minutes. I just saw someone who looked exhausted by the room. Cho was quiet for a moment, and that attracted you. The fact that she was honest about it, when I gave her the chance. Yeah, you've known each other a short time, 7 weeks. That's fast. When you're 32 and you've been alone for 5 years, and you've stopped expecting anything to surprise you, fast can feel like the exact right speed. Cho looked at him steadily, and the difference in your situations. How do you navigate that? She doesn't make me feel the difference, Evan said. And I don't let myself forget it. Both those things have to be true at the same time, or it doesn't work. From beside him he felt, rather than saw Victoria go still. Not tense still, the way she went still, when something landed in a place she hadn't anticipated. Cho sat back slightly. Her expression hadn't changed. But something in her eyes had shifted, barely perceptibly, in a direction that felt like recalculation. Hargrove, from the end of the table, spoke without looking up from his wine. It's an admirable story. The word admirable did a lot of unpleasant work in his mouth. Though one does wonder what a craftsman from Dayton brings to the table. Professionally speaking, the table went slightly quieter. Evan looked at Hargrove. He took a moment. Not because he was uncertain, because he had learned that the pause was sometimes the most powerful part of the sentence. Honesty, he said. I bring honesty. I don't have a stake in this company. I don't have a career that depends on what she thinks of me. I don't have a portfolio that rises or falls based on her decisions. When she comes home at night and I ask how it went, I'm asking because I want to know. He kept his voice level, unhurried. How many people in this room can say that? The quiet lasted 3 seconds. Then Whitmore, the man who had given up woodworking at 30, laughed. A genuine laugh, surprised and a little admiring. And the table breathed again, and the conversation moved, and Hargrove said nothing more. Under the table, Victoria's hand found Evan's wrist. She rested her fingers there for a moment, not a performance. The other guests couldn't see just for a moment. And then she removed it and picked up her wineglass. He didn't say anything about it, neither did she. On the drive home, she sat in the passenger seat of a car he'd never been in before. Her car, her driver, and looked out the window, and said nothing for 6 blocks. Then she said, "What you said to Hargrove, was it too much?" "No," she turned from the window. "How did you know to say it?" "I've been the person at the table who doesn't belong before. At every dinner party Marcus has ever thrown. At the wedding. My whole life in some contexts." He looked at the dark city moving past. "The thing about feeling small is that you develop very good instincts for who's trying to make you feel that way and why." Hargrove wasn't doing it to protect the company. He was doing it because that's how he established dominance in a room. "Yes. So I just answered the real question instead of the asked one." She was quiet for a moment. "You did that with me. The first night. I asked why you'd walked across the room to hand me a drink, and you answered something I hadn't asked." "What did I answer?" "You answered why you were someone worth talking to." She looked at him. "Before I'd asked." He thought about that. "Is Patricia Cho movable?" he asked. "After tonight, yes, I think so." She turned to the window. "Hargrove isn't. He won't be. But I only need Cho." "Then you have her. You sound sure." She looked at you differently at the end of dinner than she did at the beginning. She stopped watching you as a problem and started watching you as an answer. "A beat, you notice a lot," she said. "I told you. Carpentry teaches you to look." They were quiet for a while. The city moved around them. The driver was tactfully, professionally not present. Evan. She said it to the window first, then turned. What you said. That you don't have a stake in the company. That when you ask how her day went, you actually want to know. She stopped. Is that true, all of it? Still? He looked at her. Victoria, every morning I've been in that house. I've made coffee at 5:15. And every morning for the past 2 weeks, around 6, you've come downstairs, and you've looked at whatever I'm doing, and you've said good morning, and you've meant it. Not the PR-approved good morning, the real one. He paused. I've been waiting 2 weeks for you to stop meaning it. You haven't. She held his gaze for a long moment. I don't know how to do this slowly, she said finally. I don't have a model for it. My parents' marriage was a partnership of 2 people who were both more interested in building something than in each other. My relationship before this was, she paused, convenient. For both of us, if I'm being honest, this is not. This is not convenient, Evan agreed. No, a soft sound, not quite a laugh. It's not. Is that a problem? She looked at him for a long moment. And in the dark of the car, in the honest quiet of 2 people sitting together without the performance required, she looked 20 years younger than the CEO in the boardroom. She looked like the exhausted woman at the edge of a wedding, who needed someone to hand her a glass of something and remind her she was a person. Ask me again in a month, she said. And Evan, who was a man built for patience, who had learned that the best things, the best grain, the truest cut, the piece that became more than the sum of its materials, took exactly as long as they took, said, okay. He didn't tell Noah much about the board dinner. Noah was 6, and the mechanics of corporate governance were not yet a pressing concern for him. But the next morning, over cereal, Noah looked up at his father with that particular expression that meant he had been sitting on a thought. Dad, is V's job hard? Very. Are the people at her job nice to her? Evan thought about how to answer that honestly, without being alarming. Some of them. Noah processed this, looked at his cereal. I think she works really hard. She does. We should tell her that. You tell her, Evan said. Noah nodded seriously, as if confirming an action item. That evening, when Victoria came in the door, Noah was waiting in the hallway. He had apparently been waiting a while because Gerald was with him, which indicated a long-term stationary position. V, Noah said. She crouched down. She had started doing that automatically, not because someone told her to, but because she had noticed that Noah talked better when people were at his height. Evan had noticed her noticing. Hey, bud, I think you work really hard, Noah said. And I think you're doing a really good job. Victoria looked at his son for a moment. When she looked up at Evan, who was standing in the kitchen doorway watching, he could see what it had done to her, this small, uncomplicated declaration from a 6-year-old who had no reason to perform, no agenda, no strategy. Just a kid who had sat with a thought all day and wanted to say it. Thank you, Noah, she said. That means a lot to me. You're welcome. He picked up Gerald. Dad made chili. I heard. There's cornbread. I love cornbread. Me too. He headed for the kitchen. The important business of the hallway concluded. Come on. She stood, looked at Evan, and the thing in her face was something he didn't have a word for yet, something between gratitude and recognition, and something further than both of those, something that was still finding its shape. Come on, he said, echoing his son, it'll get cold. She walked toward him, past the threshold of the kitchen, into the ordinary warmth of the evening, and Evan Carter turned back to the stove, and the 3 of them had dinner, and outside the city moved through its unremarkable Thursday, and inside the house something was being built carefully, stubbornly, one ordinary day at a time that neither of them had a proper name for yet, but both of them, in the deepest and most honest part of themselves, were beginning to recognize. 6 weeks into the arrangement, the contract was signed, the workshop was running, and Noah had made 2 friends at school, one of whom was Theo, with the dog and the hamster. And life had taken on the shape of something that could almost be called normal. Almost. The cracks appeared, the way cracks always do, not all at once, not with a single dramatic fracture, but slowly, in the places where the pressure had been building, without anyone naming it. The first crack was small. It was a Tuesday evening. Victoria had a call that ran 2 hours past when she said it would end. Evan had made dinner, held it warm as long as he could, and eventually fed Noah and put him to bed without her. When she came out of her office at 9:45, she walked into the kitchen, saw the plate he had left covered on the stove, and said nothing for a moment. "I'm sorry," she said. "It's fine, it's not." I said 7:30. "It happens. He's asleep. The food is there." She sat down and ate alone at the kitchen table while Evan cleaned up, and they talked about small things, Noah's school project, a delivery for the workshop, whether the carriage house needed better heating for winter, and the conversation was easy and genuine, and when she finished, she put her plate in the sink and said good night and went upstairs. And Evan stood in the kitchen in the quiet and thought, that was fine, and it also wasn't fine, and I don't know how to say the second part without making it something it doesn't need to be yet. He went to bed. The second crack was bigger. It came through a screen, the way so much damage does. A Thursday morning, a major media outlet, a piece headlined, "Sterling's Convenient Husband, Love Story or Corporate Strategy." Evan read it in the workshop before 7 a.m. He read it twice. Then he set his phone face down on the workbench and stood there for a while with his hands on the wood, feeling the grain under his palms, steadying himself against something solid. The article was detailed. Someone had talked someone who knew the timing, who knew about the board situation, who had framed the engagement with a precision that could only come from proximity. It laid out the case methodically, the board's confidence vote threat, the timing of the engagement announcement, the optics of a single father as an image rehabilitation strategy. It quoted 3 unnamed sources. It described Evan as, in one particularly choice phrase, an emotionally convenient acquisition. He did not go inside the house. He worked. At 11, Victoria called. "You've seen it." "Yes. I need you to know that I don't know where it came from." "I have people looking." Victoria. He set the tool down. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer it honestly." A pause. "All right. When you sat down with me at that wedding, when you started talking to me, how much of it was real, and how much of it was you recognizing an opportunity?" The silence was 6 seconds long. He counted. "That's a fair question," she said. "I know it is. Answer it." Another pause. "When I first saw you walk toward me across that room, I was in the middle of exactly the kind of calculation the article is describing. I was thinking about solutions. I was thinking about what the board needed to see." She stopped. "And then you sat down and told me you didn't know what was in the glass, and something shifted. I can't tell you exactly where the calculation ended and the real thing started, because I'm not sure there was a clean line between them." "Can you tell me there was a real thing?" "Yes." No hesitation. "I can absolutely tell you that." He stood there in the workshop, with sawdust on his hands and the phone against his ear, and thought about clean lines and unclear ones, and the places where things couldn't be separated out. "The article calls me an emotionally convenient acquisition," he said. "I know. Is that how you think of me?" "No." The word came out with a force that surprised him. Not strategic force, the force of something true that had run out of patience for being doubted. "Evan, no, that is not how I think of you," he breathed. "Someone talked," he said. "Someone who knew the details." "Yes, who? I don't know yet, but I'll find out." He picked the tool back up, turned it in his hands. "I'm okay. I just needed to hear it from you. I should have called the moment it went up." "Before you read it alone." "Yeah," he said. "You should have." The pause was different this time. Not defensive, absorbing. Taking the thing in. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know." He set the tool to the wood again. "Come home at 7:30 tonight." "I will." Actually, 7:30. "I will, Evan." He worked. She was home at 7:20. He heard the door, heard her footsteps, heard her stop in the kitchen doorway. He was at the stove. Noah was at the table doing homework with the concentration of someone who was very much not doing homework and was actually drawing race cars in the margins. She sat down at the table without being invited, which was new. In the early weeks she had always asked, always made it clear. She understood this was his space, his routine. Now she just sat, which was different. Progress, he thought. Real progress. Theo got a fish, Noah reported without looking up. His dog tried to eat it. Did the fish survive? Victoria asked. Yeah, Theo's dad put it on a high shelf. Smart. Can we get a fish? Evan said. It's smaller than a dog. We're not starting the animal campaign with fish as a gateway. I see exactly what you're doing. Noah put his pencil down and looked at Victoria with the expression of someone seeking a coalition partner. Victoria met his eyes with an expression of complete, carefully maintained neutrality. I learned my lesson, she said. This is between you and your dad. Noah sighed heavily and went back to the race cars. Victoria looked at Evan's back. The source was Hargrove's assistant, she said quietly, low enough that Noah couldn't track it over his own narrating. My communications team confirmed it an hour ago. Someone on his team fed the details to the outlet. Evan stirred the pot. Steady, what are you going to do? I'm going to let my lawyer handle it, and I'm going to let Hargrove know, very clearly, that I know. Will that stop him? It'll slow him down. The board meeting is in 2 weeks. I need 2 weeks. She paused. I need him to understand that the story he's trying to write isn't the only story available. Evan turned from the stove, looked at her directly. And what's the other story? She held his gaze. That we're real. That this isn't a strategy. That what he leaked is a distortion of something that started as an arrangement and became something else. Did it? The kitchen was quiet except for Noah's quiet race car sound effects and the simmer of the pot. You know it did, she said. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned back to the stove. Tell me about Hargrove, he said. Not the professional version, the real version. What does he actually want? She thought about it. Control. He had it under my father. My father trusted him, deferred to him on certain things. When I took over, I didn't defer, not because I was being defiant, but because I looked at his record and his recommendations, and I determined that his judgment on several key decisions had been compromised by relationships he had with vendors who were also personally profitable to him. She paused. I didn't move on it then. I should have. Why didn't you? Because I was new, and I needed the room to think I was manageable. She said it without bitterness, just with the matter-of-fact tone of a person who had learned a lesson at considerable cost. I've spent 3 years being underestimated by people I allowed to underestimate me because it was strategically useful. And now the strategy has a 2-week deadline. Noah put his pencil down. I'm done. Let me see, Evan said. Noah brought the homework over. Evan looked at it, looked at the race cars in the margins, looked at his son. Good job on the math, he said. Interesting artistic choices on the borders. The race cars are part of the creative experience. Go wash your hands for dinner. Noah went. Evan plated the food. Victoria stood and got glasses from the cabinet. She knew where they were now. Had stopped asking where things lived, which was another small thing that mattered. 2 weeks, Evan said. 2 weeks. What do you need from me? She turned from the cabinet with the glasses in her hand and looked at him across the kitchen. Show up, she said, the way you always show up. Don't let the article change anything. Don't let Hargrove's version of us become the version you believe. She paused. And she stopped. And what? The annual foundation gala. It's in 10 days. Everyone will be there, board members, investors, press. It's the most public thing I do all year, and this year it will be. She set the glasses down. People will be watching to see what we are, to see if the article was right. So we show them it wasn't. It's not. I'm not asking you to perform. I know. He brought the plates to the table. I'm not going to perform. But I'm not going to hide either. If we go as what we are. He looked at her. What are we, Victoria? She looked at him across the kitchen table that he had set, and the food he had cooked, and the glasses she had retrieved, and the 6-year-old currently failing to wash his hands based on the sounds from the bathroom. Something real, she said, quietly, like she was still calibrating the full weight of it. Then that's what we show them. The gala was at the Art Institute. Black tie, 500 guests, the kind of event where the flowers alone cost more than most weddings. Victoria had attended every year for 6 years as CEO, always alone or with her PR-approved +1, always impeccably presented, always the most controlled person in the room. She came downstairs the evening of the gala in a gown the color of champagne, and she stopped when she saw Evan. He had the new suit on, the one he'd bought himself. He had also, at Noah's very serious recommendation, gotten a haircut. "You look," she stopped. "The suit?" he asked. "You look like you belong somewhere important," she said. And the way she said it, not polished, not PR approved, slightly off script, in the way that true things sometimes are, hit him somewhere in the chest. "You look like you're about to walk into a room and remind everyone why they should be paying attention," he said. She held his gaze for a moment. Then Noah appeared at the top of the stairs in his pajamas, having been bathed and settled with Miss Patterson, who had driven up from Dayton for the occasion, and was currently watching something loud on the living room television. "You both look really fancy," Noah reported. "Thank you, Bud," Evan said. "V, your dress is shiny." "Thank you, Noah." He appeared to be assessing something. "Are you going to hold hands?" "A beat. People hold hands at fancy things," Noah explained, with the logic of someone who had thought this through. "So they don't get lost." Evan looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at Evan. "That's a very good point," she said. Noah went back to Miss Patterson, satisfied. Evan held out his hand. She looked at it for a half second, just a half second, and then she took it. Her hand was cool and steady, and she held on without any of the careful calibration she applied to everything else. "Don't get lost," he said. "I won't," she said. They left. The gala was everything he'd expected, and one thing he hadn't. The expected things, the crowd, the scrutiny, the way people tracked Victoria's entrance with the particular attention of people who had read the article and were now running their own assessments. The photographers, the conversations that were about multiple things at once. Hargrove across the room, watching. The thing he hadn't expected was Patricia Cho. She found them within 20 minutes of arrival, not ambushing, but deliberate. The way a person might move and want to act something and want to act on it before they change their mind. Victoria, a handshake precise and warm. Then she turned to Evan. "Mr. Carter, Miss Cho, I read the article," she said. "Not as an opening gambit, just as a fact, so did I," Evan said. And I've been called worse things by better informed people." Something in her expression shifted, not quite a smile, but adjacent. "I've been on this board for 9 years," she said. "I've watched a lot of people try to run this company, and I've watched the company react to all of them. Victoria is the best operational CEO Sterling Technologies has had in its history, including its founder." She said it directly to Victoria, without deflection. "I should have said that out loud, more than I have." Victoria was very still. "Patricia, I'm voting to retain you. Whatever Hargrove brings to the table at the board meeting, I'm voting to retain." She looked between them. "And for what it's worth, I've been in rooms with strategic couples for 40 years. I know what they look like." She held Evan's gaze for a moment. "This isn't that." She moved on into the crowd. Evan and Victoria stood there. Victoria started, yeah, in the middle of the gala. She decided something, and she said it, Evan said. "I respect that." Victoria looked at the space Cho had occupied. Then she turned and looked at Evan. And there was something in her face that he had been watching build for weeks, carefully, in the way real things build, without announcing themselves, and it was fully present now. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Okay, the contract," she stopped. "Started differently. When I drafted the contract, I built in the exit point, because I thought it was the fair thing to do. Give you a way out, make it clean. Make it so that whatever happened, you weren't trapped. I know, I don't want the exit point anymore." She looked at him steadily. "I want to renegotiate, not the terms, the premise. I don't want this to be something with an endpoint. I want it to be." She stopped, and for the first time since he had known her, she looked uncertain. Not strategically uncertain, actually uncertain. The way people look when they are about to say something that can't be unsaid, and they know it. "I want it to be real, whatever real means for us. Whatever shape it takes. I want to try for that." The gala moved around them. 500 people, music, the low roar of an expensive evening in full motion. Evan looked at this woman who had handed him a proposal across a dessert plate, who had folded a napkin drawing with both hands, who had come home at 7:20, who had said something real, in a kitchen voice she hadn't planned. "You know," he said, "for someone who doesn't know how to do things slowly, You just said something very slowly. A breath of a laugh. It took me the whole event to get to it. I know, I watched you getting to it. She looked at him. And? He reached over and took her hand. The same way he had at the door, easy, unhurried, because they were two people who were no longer pretending not to know what this was. Yes, he said, we try for real. Her hand tightened around his. Once. Briefly. Okay, she said. And then, because this was Victoria Sterling and she was also always two things at once, Hargrove is at your 9 o'clock, and he's been staring at us for the last 3 minutes. Let him stare, Evan said. He's going to come over. Good, Evan. Victoria, I've been waiting 2 weeks to have a conversation with that man. He looked at her. Trust me. She looked at him for a moment. Something moved through her expression, a kind of release. The very specific release of a person who has spent years being the only one standing between themselves and everything, realizing they are not alone. Okay, she said, I trust you. Hargrove materialized. He was practiced at approaching smooth, unhurried, the kind of man who made physical space work for him. He was smiling the smile of someone who understood the purpose of smiling. Victoria, you look wonderful. He nodded at Evan. Carter. Hargrove, Evan said. Enjoying the evening? Very much, Evan said. You? Always. Hargrove's eyes moved between them with the efficiency of someone reading a situation for leverage. I imagine the last 2 weeks have been challenging. The press can be unkind. They can, Evan agreed. Though I found the article in question less unkind than just inaccurate. Which is a different problem. Is it inaccurate? The part where it called this a strategy? Yeah. Evan kept his voice easy, the way it was easy in a workshop when he was explaining something to someone who didn't know would. Informational. See, a strategy is something you calculate in advance. This he looked at Victoria, and it was not a performance. It was not for Hargrove. It was simply true, and he let it be visible, started as one thing and became another. That happens between people. It's not complicated. Hargrove's smile held. And you don't find the circumstances unusual? A man in your position suddenly connected to. To what position? Evan asked. I'm a craftsman. I build furniture. Some of it ends up in houses a lot nicer than mine was. I don't find my position unusual. I find it honest. A pause. Which is more than I can say for the person who fed those details to a reporter. The smile didn't waver, but something behind it recalculated. Bold words, Hargrove said. I make things with my hands, Evan said. I don't really know how to make anything else. He tilted his head slightly. Is there something you actually wanted to say? Because if so, say it. We've got an evening to get back to. 3 seconds of silence. Hargrove looked at Victoria. You've found quite a companion. Yes, Victoria said, I have. And the way she said it quietly, with no performance in it. Just the plain truth of a woman who had spent years being alone in rooms full of people and had recently stopped being alone, landed in the air between the three of them like a full sentence. Hargrove moved on. Evan turned to find Victoria looking at him with an expression he did not have a word for and was not sure he needed one. You've been waiting 2 weeks to do that, she said. I really have. Was it satisfying? Extremely. He looked across the room. He's going to be difficult at the board meeting. He's going to try. She turned to face the room properly, shoulders back, and he watched the CEO reassemble itself over the woman not as a hiding, but as a tool. The right tool for the right job. 2 weeks ago, I would have told you I needed to handle it alone. And now? She looked at him sideways. Now I know where the workshop is, she said. He understood what she meant, that she knew where to find him. That the knowing was itself, the thing, not what he would do, not the strategy he would provide, just the fact of his specific, ordinary, irreplaceable presence at the end of whatever the board meeting turned out to be. I'll be there, he said. I know, she said. And she walked into the crowd, and people moved for her the way they always moved for her, and this time, when he watched her go, it was different than the first time at a different party in a different life. This time, she looked back, just once, across the crowd, over the heads of 500 people who were all watching her for their own reasons. She looked back at him, and Evan Carter, who had learned not to expect surprises, felt something move through him that was neither small nor manageable, nor the kind of thing that fit inside a contract with a defined exit point. He felt, for the first time in 5 years, like the future was not just something to navigate. It was something to want. The board meeting was in 4 days. He spent those 4 days in the workshop, building. The dining table was finished. Had been finished for a week, and he had started something new. A piece he hadn't been commissioned for. A piece he was building, because he needed to build something, and because the shape of it had come to him at 2 in the morning and refused to leave. It was a chair, simple lines, white oak, the kind of chair that was made to last generations. The kind of chair that said, "This house is permanent. This life is real. Something is being built here that is meant to stay." He worked. He didn't tell her what it was for. Some things you build first and explain after. The board meeting was on a Thursday. Evan knew the moment it started because Victoria had told him the time 9 a.m. And at 9 a.m., he was in the workshop with his hands in the oak, and he was aware of the time the way you're aware of weather moving in from the west. Not watching it, just knowing it was happening. Noah was at school. The house was quiet except for the tools and the radio, playing something low and country that he didn't entirely register. He worked with the kind of focus that isn't really focus, but is more like surrender, giving the hands over to the thing they know how to do so the rest of you can sit with what you're waiting for. The chair was nearly done. He had been working on it for 4 days. White oak, clean lines, a slight curve to the back that had taken him 2 attempts to get right. No ornamentation, no excess. The kind of piece that announced nothing about itself and would outlast everyone in the room by 100 years. He ran his hand along the back rail. True, the joint at the leg was tight, no give. He tilted it, set it down, sat in it himself for a moment, a thing he always did with chairs. The final test, because a chair that didn't feel right to sit in had failed at its fundamental purpose, regardless of how it looked. It felt right. He stood up, looked at it. Then his phone rang. It was 11:47. He picked up before the second ring. "Tell me," he said. Victoria's voice came through clear and level, and he could not immediately read it, which was unusual. He had spent months learning her voice, the frequencies of it, what the controlled tone covered, and what the slightly rougher edges meant. "It's done," she said, and a pause. 3 seconds. 7-5, she said, "in my favor." He sat back down in the chair. "Put one hand flat on the workbench." "Cho voted with you," he said. "Not a question. Cho Whitmore and 2 others who I didn't expect." Her voice was still level, still controlled, but at the very edge of it, the far edge, the part she couldn't fully manage, something was happening. Hargrove called for the vote at 10:15. He had his speech prepared. He had documentation. He had 3 of his people in a row. A pause. And then Patricia Cho stood up before he finished and said that she had reviewed the operational record, the growth trajectory, and the leadership performance of this CEO over 6 years, and that she would not be supporting a confidence motion that was motivated by personal grievance rather than professional merit. That's a direct quote. I have it memorized. A sound that was almost a laugh. Almost. Whitmore seconded, and it went to vote. Evan looked at the chair, at the grain of the oak, at the thing he had built while he waited for this. "Victoria," he said, "I'm here. Are you okay?" The pause this time was different. Longer. The kind that meant someone was deciding how honest to be, and then deciding to be fully honest. "I'm sitting in my car in the parking garage," she said. "I told my assistant I needed 10 minutes. I've been sitting here for 22. Another pause. "I keep thinking about my father, about what he would say." Her voice dropped slightly. "He would have loved you, I think. He would have found you in about 40 minutes at some party and talked to you about wood grain for an hour, and then told me he was the most interesting person there." Evan closed his eyes for a moment. "Go back inside," he said. "Finish the day, do what needs doing, I know, and come home at 7:30. A sound, the real laugh this time, quieter than he'd heard it, but completely real. "Actually 7:30? Actually 7:30. I have something to show you." "A beat. The chair?" she asked. He looked at it. "How did you know about the chair?" "Noah told me." He said you were building something secret and that I wasn't allowed to know what it was, and then he told me it was a chair. A pause. He's not great at secrets. He's 6. He's very endearing about it. Go back inside, Victoria. I'm going. A beat, Evan. Yeah, thank you, for all of it. The dinner and the gala and Hargrove. A pause. For showing up. He looked around the workshop, the sawdust, the tools on their hooks, the smell of oil and oak and work. The window that let in the thin November light, the chair. That's what I do, he said. That's the whole thing. She went back inside. He went back to work. She was home at 7:25. He heard the door, and then her footsteps pausing in the kitchen, the pause he recognized as her clocking the absence of cooking smells and recalibrating, and then she came to the back and opened the workshop door. She was still in her work clothes. Jacket on, which meant she hadn't stopped anywhere, had come directly from the car to the door to here. Her hair was slightly less exact than it had been that morning. Her eyes were tired in the specific way of someone who has been fully present and fully in charge for 8 hours and has used everything available. She looked at the chair. It was in the center of the workshop, in the best light. He had positioned it there, deliberately. She walked toward it slowly, stopped in front of it, looked at the lines of it, the joints, the curve of the back. She reached out and touched the top rail the way he had touched it himself following the grain. It's beautiful, she said. Sit in it. She looked at him. Then she sat, settled into it, her hands on the arms, her back finding the curve, and he watched the moment when she felt that it was made well. Her shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch. Just that. Where is this going? She asked. The dining room, he said. At the head of the table, she was quiet. I built it for you, he said. Not as part of any arrangement, not as part of any contract. I built it because you needed something in this house that was yours. That was made for you specifically. That knew your shape. He looked at it. Every person who lives somewhere needs one thing in it that was built with them in mind. I should have built it sooner. She sat in the chair he had built her and looked at him and said nothing for a moment. The workshop was quiet around them. Outside somewhere, Noah was inside with Miss Patterson, and the city was doing its evening things, and the world was moving at its usual indifferent pace. I've bought a lot of things, she said, for myself, for spaces I've lived in. I've had people whose job it was to make those spaces look right. She paused. Nobody has ever built me anything. I know. How do you know? Because you looked at that napkin, drawing like it was made of gold. He met her eyes. You keep things people make for you. You don't keep things people sell you. She looked at the arm of the chair, at the grain in the wood, at the joint where the arm met the leg, mordant tenon, tight, built to last. I want to tell you something, she said. Tell me. When the vote came through, when Cho stood up and said, what she said, the first thing I thought wasn't about the company. It wasn't about Hargrove or the board or the share price or any of it. She looked up at him. The first thing I thought was that I wanted to tell you. Specifically you. Not my lawyer, not my communications team, not anyone else. She paused. That's never happened before. After 6 years of running this company, after every crisis and every win, I've never had a first thought like that. Evan crouched down so he was at her level. The same way she crouched for Noah, he realized the position of someone who wanted to be heard without the height differential, doing anything to the words. When Claire died, he said slowly, there was a week where I couldn't figure out what to do with my hands. I'm a person who works with my hands. It's how I think, how I process. And for a week I couldn't touch a tool. I just sat. He looked at the workshop floor. And then one morning I went out to the garage and I built a shelf. The most basic shelf you can imagine. 6 boards, 8 screws. It took 40 minutes, and when it was done I stood there and I thought, I'm still here. I can still make things. He looked at her. That shelf is in Noah's room. He keeps his books on it. She held his gaze. I'm still here, he said. That's the thing I know how to do. Show up and stay and build something that lasts. He paused. If you want that, if you want what's real and what stays. I told you at the gala, she said. I know. I wanted to say my version. She reached out and put her hand on the side of his face. Not a strategy, not a performance, just a hand, warm and certain, and a person behind it who had made a decision. "I want what stays," she said. He covered her hand with his. They stayed like that for a moment in the quiet of the workshop, in the smell of the oak, in the particular stillness of two people who have arrived somewhere after a long way of traveling. Then Noah's voice came from the door to the house, muffled through two walls. "Dad, Miss Patterson says dinner won't make itself." They looked at each other. Victoria laughed first. "The full one. He's not wrong," she said. "He never is." Evan stood, offered her his hand, and pulled her up from the chair. "Come on, let's go make dinner." The public story of Victoria Sterling and Evan Carter continued to run, as these stories do, in the spaces they couldn't control. Columns were written, analyses were conducted. People who had never met either of them had strong opinions about what they represented and what it meant. Evan stopped reading the coverage sometime in December and never went back to it. Not from bitterness, from the same reason you stop checking the weather forecast when you're already outside. It had nothing to tell him that the actual air couldn't tell him better. What the actual air told him: Noah came home from school in February with a drawing of their family that now contained 4 figures. Large yellow one labeled Daddy, medium dark-haired one labeled V, small blue one labeled me, and a smaller yellow one in the corner that he had labeled, in careful 6-year-old letters, Baby, with a question mark after it. Evan looked at it for a long moment. "Bud," he said. "What's this one?" Noah looked at the drawing with the objective assessment of an artist reviewing his own work. "That's in case," he said. "In case of what?" "In case we get one." He picked up his pencil. "I left a question mark because I'm not sure yet." Evan folded the drawing, put it in his pocket, did not say anything else about it. That evening, after Noah was in bed, he found Victoria in the kitchen with her laptop and a cup of the tea she'd started drinking at 9 p. Because it turned out the terrible diner coffee had migrated into her daily routine, and her doctor had suggested she consider an evening sealing. He put the drawing on the table beside her laptop. She looked at it, at all 4 figures, at the small yellow one in the corner with the question mark. She did not say anything for a long moment. "He drew this himself?" she asked. Entirely unprompted, she looked at it for another moment. Her finger traced the outline of the one labeled VE, which Noah had given a crown again, consistent with his original artistic vision. "I've been thinking," she said, "about." She looked up at him. And the thing in her face was open in a way that she had learned, in these months, to let it be. Not unguarded recklessly with intention, choosing to be seen, which was different from having no armor and was much harder. "About whether this works," she said. "Not the company, not the arrangement, not any of the structure we put around it at the beginning. This," she gestured at the table, the kitchen, the house around them. "The actual thing. What's your assessment?" A small smile. "My assessment is that a 6-year-old drew a question mark, baby, because he's decided we're a family that might grow." She paused. "And my assessment is that he's not wrong." Evan pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "The contract has an exit clause," he said. "I know. We said we'd renegotiate the premise. We did. So what does real look like?" he asked. "Not the exit clause version. The other version." She closed the laptop, turned to face him fully. Victoria Sterling, who had run a billion-dollar company through a hostile board vote, who had rebuilt herself from loss, who had spent decades being valued for everything except the parts of herself she actually wanted someone to see. She sat in the chair he had built for her dining room and looked at the man who had built it and said, "The simplest version of the most complicated thing. It looks like this," she said. "This kitchen, this hour. Noah asleep upstairs, you across the table." A pause. "It looks like every ordinary thing I spent my whole career thinking I didn't need. And now I know what I was missing." She held his gaze. "I don't want the exit clause, Evan. I want the question mark, baby." He looked at her. Then he reached across the table and took her hand. "Then we do it right," he said. "No contract, no arrangement, no defined endpoint." He turned her hand over in his, the way he turned wood assessing, finding the truth of it. "We do it like people who chose each other. Because that's what we did. Somewhere between the wedding and the diner and the board meeting and the chair we chose each other." "Yes," she said, "we did. Outside, Chicago did its winter things. In the workshop, the chair waited in the dark. Upstairs, Noah slept with Gerald and the quiet certainty of a child who had decided that the future was going to contain good things and saw no reason to question his own assessment. And in the kitchen of a brownstone in Lincoln Park, two people who had been alone in separate ways sat across from each other with their hands connected and the question mark drawing between them and the whole unscheduled length of the future ahead. 6 months later, Marcus Webb called Evan on a Saturday morning while Evan was in the workshop and Noah and Victoria were at the farmer's market up the street. A ritual that had started because Victoria had wanted to understand what Evan meant when he said he cooked from what was available and had become, quietly, the best part of their Saturday. "I need a table," Marcus said. "Dining room, 8 people." "Something that lasts. 6-month waiting list," Evan said. "I'm on it." A pause also. "How are you actually?" Evan looked around the workshop, at the tools on their hooks, at the piece of cherry he was roughing out, the beginning of someone else's heirloom, at the window with the view of the back garden where Noah had started lobbying for a vegetable patch. "Good," he said. "The real kind? The real kind." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad. I knew, you know. That night, when I found you two in that corner, I knew something was happening. You didn't say anything. I'm not an idiot. You don't say anything. You just let it go where it goes." A pause. "Where did it go?" Evan heard the front door, and then Noah's voice telling Victoria about something at the market, with the full urgency of someone reporting a significant event, and then Victoria's voice lower, asking questions, actually listening the way she always actually listened, and then the sound of bags put down and footsteps, and the ordinary music of people arriving home. "Home," Evan said. "It went home." He heard Marcus smile through the phone. "Good," Marcus said. "That's a good answer." After he hung up, Victoria appeared in the workshop doorway. She was holding a paper bag and wearing the coat she'd bought, specifically for the farmer's market, which had become its own kind of signal, not the CEO coat, not the professional armor, just a woman in a warm coat on a Saturday morning. "Noah found heirloom tomatoes," she announced. "He's very excited." He described them as fancy tomatoes, and the vendor agreed enthusiastically and sold us twice as many as we needed. "That sounds about right." He also asked whether chickens counted as pets. She looked at Evan steadily. "I told him that was a conversation for his father." "Very diplomatic, I'm learning." She held up the bag. "Lunch? Yeah." He set the tool down. "Give me 10 minutes." She went back inside. He stood for a moment in the quiet of the workshop, in the smell of cherry wood and the winter light and the sound sign of the house, explaining something with great enthusiasm to a woman who had walked into their life like a fact that needed no explanation. He thought about the suit bought for a funeral, about the crack in the truck window, about a ballroom where he had been invisible until he wasn't, and a woman at the edge of it wearing exhaustion like something she'd forgotten she had on. He thought about $40 a month into a college fund and the particular loneliness of dressing for something without anyone to tell you that you look fine. He thought about a napkin drawing with a crown and a chair built in 4 days and a question mark that had settled into an answer. Okay. He thought about what it meant to build something that lasted. Then he took off his work gloves, walked through the workshop door, and went inside to his family. Some things you don't plan. Some things, clients, don't arrive the way you expected them to, don't knock at the right door or announce themselves with any of the signals you were watching for. Some things find you in the corner of a room you almost didn't enter, hand you a glass of something neither of you can identify, and sit down beside you in the quiet. Evan Carter had driven 3.5 hours in an old truck to stand at the edge of someone else's wedding. He had arrived alone, invisible, certain that the evening would be something to get through. He had left with everything, and this, the kitchen, the Saturday, the heirloom tomatoes, the boy who believed in question marks, the woman who had learned to want ordinary things. This was not the ending of something temporary. This was the beginning of something built to last.